Welcome to Creative Courage Chats, a search for a new understanding of creativity and problem solving. I'm Alex Raffi.
Sure.
All right, well, hey, welcome to another Creative Courage Chats. I'm here with a wonderful person, a teacher, a friend of mine that we've worked together in the past, Casey Juliano. I said I was going to say it Italian, so I'm going to say Juliano.
Yes.
So she's a teacher at Nate Mack Elementary, and why don't you, Casey, why don't you talk a little bit about what you do?
Sure. I'll start by saying I'm a native Las Vegas. I was born at Sunrise Hospital. So I've been here a long time, and now I live and teach in Henderson, which I just love. Yeah. And this is starting my 23rd year of teaching, and I've taught every grade, kindergarten through 5th. I've been out of the classroom, I've done teacher training, but I'm back in now, and I'm our teacher librarian at Nate Mack Elementary School. So I have 643 students that I love and adore from pre-K to 5th grade. And I try to build relationships with all of them. And I'm also our robotics coach at our school. And next year, taking on a hydroponics coordinator, because we just wrote a grant for that.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's another new program. So.
But you're not just a robotics coach. You guys are a winning robotics team.
We are.
You have multiple successes. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Sure. My first year, I always had a tech club, and then a great friend of mine who ran a robotics program over at Greenspun said, "You have a tech program, you should have a robotics team." And I said, "I don't know how to build a robot." He said, "You don't have to, the kids do." So he got me into robotics that first year, and that was Matt Christian, and he's their robotic coach over there. And he just supported me all year long. And that first year was the first year that elementary school had a division to go to Worlds, and we won. And so we went to Worlds. And then the second year, there was still only one open spot for Worlds from Nevada because we were still small. But two of my teams went, because not only did we beat all the middle schools or the elementary schools, but we beat the middle schools as well. So then we went with two. And then the third year, it blew up, and there were grants. And so lots of teams came on, and we did lots of mentoring. I took teams, Mr. Christian took teams, lots of other people took teams, and it's really exploded. Right. And so then there were 3 spots available for Worlds. And that year, all 3 of my teams, which I have 3, swept the competition, and all 3 of them went to Worlds. So I took 17 kids to Louisville, and they competed against the elite robotics teams from all over the world, 40 nations, in fact, 15,000 kids. And it was just quite an experience. And then this year, we double qualified for Worlds, winning 2 big events. But we did not get to go to Louisville because of all of the world situations. And we were just grateful that the Rec Foundation and Bex held a virtual Worlds, and we're excited that one of our favorite teams in our hearts, and especially in mine, the team from Coronado High School, won the world virtual competition. Wow. Yeah, so we're just in the company of lots, and we're small and still in Nevada compared to other states, but we're mighty. And so I love that. And all 3 teams, the Greenspun team, the Coronado team, our team, we're all from Henderson. And so we're really proud of that. And all 3 of us have been to Worlds, I believe, the last at least 4 or 5 years. And so it's really exciting.
You guys are definitely a big jewel in the crown of Henderson education, that's for sure. I love the way you do this, and I happen to have seen it. You've had me over to speak to your students. I've done my Creative Courage workshop for them.
Yes, they loved it so much. I did too. I learned so much.
Well, that's the thing, is that it's something for everybody, but it's most fun when you do it with kids, because
of course.
I ask some questions during the workshops, and their answers are so great.
Yeah, and they're risk takers.
Yes.
They're not afraid.
Right, that's the key reason. Okay, that's kind of where I was kind of going with this.
Yeah.
Because you, as a teacher, are very talented, and I think it's because in terms of when you're teaching kids, this is my own view on this, so I'm going to share a little bit of my personal view, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, because you're the professional here. But when kids are young and they're trying to learn, they're not intimidated. They want to learn. They're hungry to learn. They're built to learn. They're wired to learn, and they have this wild want to consume.
Yeah.
And it's really great to watch, and it's fantastic. But the mistake that a teacher might make is just to kind of not also prepare them for the systematic way that the world works. That you can be wild and creative, but be that way, understanding their systems and processes and things. And I think that you are fantastic in bridging the wild, creative mind of a child, but also holding them accountable for understanding that there are rules to follow to succeed sometimes. And I think that's something that a lot of times is, I mean, it's great to be creative, but a wildly creative person, and when you execute the creativity poorly, it doesn't matter how great great it is. And I think that's something that you do, that I've seen that you've done in class, and I'm really impressed. Am I right on the money on that?
You're right on the money. And in fact, I try and be a bridge between, because I do so much of staff development, and that's working with the teachers and with the kids, and it's bridging the two. It's not just on the kids' end, learning how to play the game of life. It's also on the adult end, is remembering how to embrace the creative and crazy. And Neil deGrasse Tyson says it best. He does this whole speech, his whole program, and you can actually Google it. And he talks about how kids don't need to learn science. Science is about being curious about the world around you and then wanting to know more about it. All kids are that. They, that's why they go and they pick up, want to touch the fire, and they want to pick up dirt and put it in their mouth. They're trying to figure things out. That's all science. That's all an experiment. And we're constantly saying, no, and he does this thing with an egg where he throws it up in the air, and we tell kids, no, you're going to drop that. But really and truly, they drop it, and it's a lesson in the life cycle of the chicken, and it's a lesson in gravity and physics. And so there's so much that can come out of things that we're saying no to all the time. So it's bridging the gap between the two and finding and embracing the middle, especially in the 21st century, as all of those factors and the variables come into play that are new, and embracing what's important to the kids. And but it doesn't really matter to me what media is in front of you. Technology, it could be a book, because a book is a technology, all the way, a pencil is a technology, all the way up to an iPad. You can't teach anybody anything until you've built a relationship. And so I don't think we take nearly enough time always at the beginning of a school year to build that relationship. And one of the goals in the library, again, we have 642 students, and I work alongside my library assistant, and her name is Priscilla, and she's wonderful. She's been in our library 19 years, and she's phenomenal with kids. And our goal every year is to know every student's name and a story about all of them. And because if we don't know each other, how can I pinpoint what your needs are? How can I reach you? And then when there's someone who needs more from me, either they need more because they're maybe advanced or gifted, or or maybe they're just not quite fitting in, or maybe they're struggling as a family financially, or have other needs that need to be met, or maybe they're just a tricky kid, then I like to work with those students who have some kind of a special way that they're not feeling connected in another area. And I'll pull them in to help me with a project in the library, or become a hydroponics expert, or I go out to the playground and just spend time with them. And they're like, why are you here? And I'm like, I'm on lunch and I wanted to come see how you were today. Because you can't teach them until they know you value them, right, and that you're there for them. And a kid who has never felt supported before, or doesn't feel like school's a place for them, takes a long time to build a relationship. They're not going to just believe you because you showed up once. You have to show up even when it's hard. And so before I do anything, it's building relationships for me. And I spend a lot of time and hold that in my heart.
So in terms of the way you communicate with kids, mm-hmm, there's a lot of complexity and sometimes there's simplicity, but also complexity that I think we could learn a lot from in terms between the way a teacher communicates with a student and the
Mm-hmm.
way a grown person relates with another grown person.
Right.
Where there's certain things that are done that I think that one of the things that I think is interesting is that we assume that the children are more fragile than they actually are.
Exactly.
And they're not intellectually fragile at all.
No. Well, they're not personally fragile
No,
as well.
right.
Right.
Yeah, personally or however you want to look, and letting them speak, and as long as they feel safe and it's a safe environment,
Yep.
you can challenge them without fear of hurting feelings or whatever it is. And I know that you have a situation, you've invited me to this, where me and a group of other chosen people that you've picked out
Yeah.
observe the kids working on particular projects.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have us judge which kids are showing something interesting or unique in their manner of their approach. And I think that that's really interesting because your goal is to maximize the potential within these kids that are going to learn together. But it also teaches a bigger lesson to the kids that don't get picked, is that it shows them that you might have missed something. Maybe in the next one you can make that effort. When they start to kind of go back, because as soon as they don't win, they're thinking, well, what did I do? What did I do? What did I do? And maybe they were twiddling their thumbs too much, or maybe they were gabbing too much, or maybe they weren't really working on the project. They weren't focusing enough. And there has to be an understanding that when those things happen, there are repercussions. And I think that not everybody should get a trophy kind of a thing.
I agree. And I don't think we're giving students enough opportunity always, and not just students, kids, opportunities to not get picked. Right. And because your life as you're growing is about getting picked and not getting picked for things. And when you don't get picked for something, the people who are successful take that information, they actually extend out for feedback to know how they can improve. And then they go out better and they learn more and they do better. And the number one thing that I really value in my students is the ones who don't make the robotics team. And I don't judge that first day. I know the kids so well. I don't want to come with my preconceived biases and notions. I want it to be experts who are good at looking for different types of creative outlets and don't know the kids. And so that day I don't judge at all. And so I love the feedback that I've gotten, and I've picked kids that maybe would have been off of my radar in other years. And I don't think it gives everyone an opportunity to shine in their value. But if somebody doesn't make it for whatever reason, when they sit with me, and I feel this way anytime I always have the parent and the kid come, because it's a growing experience for both. And in order for a student to grow, it takes a team. And so whether it's about robotics, whether it's somebody's being tricky in class and they need to sit down and fix it, or they're having an academic issue that needs to get fixed, there's nothing that I think sometimes when we call parents in, we sometimes want to sugarcoat it and say, oh, I love them because of, and then you list 10 things. And then the parents are confused because they're like, well, you called me in because there's a problem. What's the problem? And it's hard to talk about kids in the terms of where they're having challenges. So I usually cut right to the chase. And I'll say, I'm so proud of you for coming and trying out. And I would love to see you on the team next year. I'd love to see you try out at your next school. Right. And these are the things that need to happen in order for that. And I'm very clear and precise with my language and very to the point. So, and these are in priority order, the things that you need to do. And I have high expectations and I know you can get there and you are close. Or if you do these 3 things, you're going to have a better chance next year. And I still don't say you'll make it because who knows? There's always somebody better than you and that you can learn from. So I can't say for sure that you would make it if you did these things, but these were the things that you can improve on for next time. And I think that when I look at my son, I played soccer, my son plays club soccer. We're a big soccer family, you know that. And when I listen to coaches on the field, and I also played softball, I'm a sports girl. And one thing that sports coaches do that is wonderful, and also if you watch on PBS, the great British baking show, they're really good at giving feedback too. It's amazing because there's tears and these people are passionate about what they do, just like sports people are, but they don't sugarcoat and mess around with a bunch of fluff. They get right to the point because they want you to get better. So at the beginning of a school year, I say, I love you. I'm an expert. I'm a master at my job here. And I show my kids my resume. This is why I'm a master at what I do. I'm fully educated I research, I read a book a week, a professional book a week at least. I am an expert and I'm really good at helping solving problems. And if you had a tricky time in school, I'm going to help you with that. You just come to me, and you have to set yourself up as an expert for them, that you may not have all the answers, but you know where to find the solutions and you'll help them work through it. And so I think that it's the feedback that is so important. And sports coaches and where sometimes we feel like it comes off as gruff, kids want that feedback. They want to get better. And when they trust you and know you love them, and my favorite saying to kids who are struggling in some way, especially when they're in that give up moment where they're at a fork in the road, is, you know what? I love you too much to let you give up on yourself. So I'm going to love you more than you can right now. And that means that you may not like me very much. And that is, we need to make sure that we're pushing with love and we have high expectations, because a student who is struggling, maybe they have not been given opportunities that other kids have had. Maybe they're have financial needs, or they're at risk in some way. There's so many ways you can be at risk, but are at risk in many areas. They don't need your pity. They don't need to be babied. They need you to help you to rise out of their situation and the struggles that they're in. And so you sometimes have to be that pusher and that nagger and do it with love. And when they do accomplish things, you need to recognize it, and they'll really rise to your occasion. And I have such a track record of results, not just with my robotics team, but when I was in the classroom with anywhere thing from test scores, that, you know, all of those things in that you can push with love. And when you have a teacher who may seem firm and strict and out there pushing your child, embrace it, because you're going to have years where you have lovely teachers who love on your child and that they really connect with socially. But when you get a teacher who can make your child work and learn, and sometimes that comes with frustration and hardships, and then you have to embrace that teacher too, because it's all about partnerships and working together as a team. And when you have someone who's ready to take on that challenge of something that you and your child may have been struggling with all this time, and they're ready to work as a team, embrace that.
Yeah, you know, everything everything you said is fantastic. I'm so glad. I'm so glad this was recorded. What's interesting to me is that because I think courage has a lot to do with everything that we're talking about.
Everything.
And I think that young people need to be encouraged. And what's interesting to me is you're a great teacher, and you didn't just come out of the womb a great teacher. You learned how to be a great teacher from your students by creating an environment where they felt safe enough to challenge you as a teacher.
Yes.
And I think that's the missing link sometimes. I think that when especially a new teacher coming up there, they don't show up. Even, I don't care how many degrees you have, you don't show up being a great teacher. You just don't. It's a learned process. And
it's not just learning from the teachers or their students either. It is teaching is very isolating. You're in a room by yourself, and you're afraid to ask for help because you don't want to seem like you're not an expert or that you don't know. But it doesn't matter whether you've been teaching 1 year. It doesn't matter whether you're in your third year. When you aren't reaching a kid, when you are not helping them to grow for whatever reason, or maybe a class, maybe the dynamic of a class is one that you've never dealt with, you ask for help from experts. And it's teachers who work in collaboration and positive collaborations and can humble themselves to say, I am a great teacher, but I don't know this. And I think and I had an amazing mentor. So not only did I have, the kids teaching me, I taught mostly at-risk environments in my career, and is that I started at the teaching school at UNLV, and I had the most amazing people around me, including Marcia Morgan, who to this day is not just with myself, but around the district is a phenomenal teacher. And she was my mentor for 5 years. And when I didn't know what to do, she would come in and model it for me, and we would work through it together. And I think that collaboration in any work environment, when you can have a strong collaboration where you value feedback and it's not personal, and you trust each other, and you can constantly grow ideas from different perspectives that may not be your own, it's brilliant. And I feel like I'm at that environment right now. I work with a phenomenal staff, and I would not, given the choice, I would never not work for Nancy Hebe.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, mentors are fantastic. I actually interviewed one of mine in this process, and
That must have been fun.
I can't not get goosebumps when I talk to this man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I feel about Marcia. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like everything he says makes sense to me and helps me through a lot of things. And I think it's important. And I think that people have that moment of clarity where they realize that. And hopefully, if you are a student and you're watching this, and there's a teacher who affected you in a positive way, do yourself a favor and call them, and call them and let them know, because it's good to do that, and it's good, and it'll make you feel fantastic doing it. I was able to sit and really express the importance. He was uncomfortable for him a little bit. but I know he appreciated it. But it is hard sometimes to hear. But it is important, and it's a good process to go through. But we talk about, like I said, I was talking about courage and communications. I think that right now we're having a tough time in this country communicating with each other. And
I agree.
And I think that there's the lessons that can be learned from great teachers is important, and the courage that is in young people, and especially the situation in schools where we allow kids to fail and not feel lesser because they have failed. I think that's something that has turned into a bit of a mental illness, to be honest. I'll say it because I don't think you would. Is our fear of failure and not seeing failure as a tool to use to get better. And I think that there's this strange ego issue where people overcompensate. They for things. They pat themselves on the back for having the right answers to the wrong questions, and I think that's a big problem that we have. And I think that right now we're struggling with the residue of that in general.
I think that the one thing I'll advocate for right now is libraries. And I don't think that throughout history, not just in our time now, you can go back to the Great Depression, all the way back in history, that places of equality and equity have always been library. It gives you free access to become anything that you want to be. And the thing that right now that libraries are so focused on is the issue of fake news. And in fact, it's a huge part of my curriculum in the library, is understanding where to find valid data, what that looks like, and speaking. And it's okay to disagree with somebody, but I think even more than communicating, the part of it is we're not listening to each other. We're going into things with our opinion and wanting to spout our opinion without listening and truly listening to somebody else's approach to the world, and forgetting that two people can be right, and but in be different situations and need different things. And so I feel like the part of the communication is missing is the not listening part, and not lowering our ego or saying I am all of this thing. And I don't think all of us are all of anything. We may believe parts of something, but because we're so bent on saying I am this thing and belonging to a group in some way, that we aren't able to listen to parts that we might have a different viewpoint on, and looking at data and where do you find valid sources. And so we spend a lot of time in libraries talking about how to find valid pieces. And I don't think that libraries, whether they're at schools or in public, they are places of curiosity. They are places of equity. They are places where I can get you a resource to anything, and it doesn't have to, they are not archives. They used to be places like a store where you could go get things, or things were archived. I say now they're more like a kitchen. It's a place for you to grapple with and make knowledge come to life. And I don't think we've ever need libraries as much as we need them right now in our culture, so that every single person has access and equity to anything that they would want to have to be whatever they want to be. And that's part of that communication too, is becoming an informed citizen to have valuable conversations. The more you learn, the better a communicator you become, because you really learn to see the different perspectives throughout history.
I totally agree. I'm a huge advocate for libraries. We worked with the Henderson Library District for a very long time.
Yeah.
And librarians are amazing. And I always thought that of libraries is kind of although they weren't invented in the United States, there are very few things that are as American as a library.
Yeah.
Where if you have the will, and the library is like the bootstraps required to help you pull you out of anything you need to get
Yes.
pulled out of. You can find answers, you can educate yourself, you can earn a degree.
You can earn a
Take your
degree.
time.
And the librarian will help you get the resources to earn
Right.
that degree and the paperwork and help you fill it out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, because we didn't have Google when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I remember whenever I had this, I don't know where I got it, but thank goodness I did, is that whenever I was curious about anything, I would walk to my library. It wasn't a lot near walk. It was a long way. I'd have to walk. It's right by a park. I would go in there. I would go into the books. And, I would be into pirates, let's say. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I got a bunch of pirate books, and I learned as much as I could learn. I made copies of the pages that were cool and the pictures that were cool. And I would sit there, and I learned a lot of stuff about pirates when I was a kid. And then some of the anecdotes I learned about pirates, I talk about them in my Creative Courage workshop. So you carry this information. And I was able to
you have your passions and what you learn about.
Right. There's connections and things like that. And you never know what is going to inspire something that is going to change your life.
Yeah.
And it could be the search for information and a chasing your curiosity that could do it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. That's what it happens in education. That's what happens all over the place. And that's what happens to you. And there's always a connector that I think is important, that's relatable. And we're talking about people communicating with each other. And the unfortunate thing is, in a constructive conversation, both people in the conversation are playing the same game.
Mm-hmm.
We're both not worried about our egos. You and I are just talking about things, and we're exploring the room. I'm not coming from a place of worrying what you think about me, and vice versa. We're just searching. Yeah. But unfortunately, we're in situations now where sometimes we communicate and there's fragile egos on the other side of the room when we're trying to talk. Yeah. So it's more important now to consider that, because if the point is to get someone to learn what it is you're trying to say, maybe you shouldn't lead with an insult or lead with a criticism of their intelligence or do something in those terms. I personally, I'm pretty passionate about things, and I jump into things, I'm all in on things. I have made major mistakes in the past. I was an editorial cartoonist, and I have made points wholly knowing in my head that I'm 100% right. Mm-hmm. And then I say the thing totally thinking I'm being a champion for this cause. Right. And people who are within the cause told me that I was so off, and I was actually insulting them in the manner in which I was trying to defend them, that it worked totally against me. And then I at first was like, wait a minute, no, you don't understand. And clearly I was the one who didn't understand. Yeah. And so there's this thing where I started to realize you're not as smart as you feel like you are, but you need to.
But none of us are. And that's it.
Right. But you shouldn't let that make you afraid to explore things still. No. Say the thing, be wrong, learn from the mistake, and then just be better. And
that's the risk-taking part of it. Maya Angelou says, when you know better, do better. And if you're going into things with an authentic, humanity, really trying to understand more about the world and supporting others, then as long as you can take the feedback and learn from it, I think that is the value in putting yourself out there sometimes, because there are times when other people are feeling the same way and you don't realize that your interpretation is different. And my thoughts on that, I think about the world and what's happening right now. And this was even before all the things happened, my entire focus of next year, I always like to have a theme in my head. I became a librarian 3 years ago. And so one of my goals is to make sure that there are books that reflect all of the students who attend our school. Right. And my big epiphany to this was when I was becoming a teacher. I took children's literature class, and I read a book that is probably one of my favorites, my top 5. and it's called Bud Not Buddy, and Christopher Paul Curtis is the author. And it's a book. He's a Black author, and it's about a Black family and a boy who ends up in foster care and his journey into finding his family. And after I read that book, it was profoundly touched me in the humanity of it and how much I connected as a human, because my dad was older than most dads that of my friends. He was born in 1926. He was raised in the Great Depression. He came over with my Italian grandma 7 years after his dad was here. And then the 2 years after they moved to America, my grandfather got a brain tumor and died. And so they're hot in the middle of the Great Depression with a mother and 6 kids who don't speak English. And so he had many, many stories. And so I so connected to so many of his stories through this telling of this boy in the Great Depression. But what it, more than anything it did, was it was a true and real story about a student from another culture. And I think it was the first time I'd ever read a book that was a story that had a character that was not a central focus and revolved around a white character. And that really has struck me ever since. And that was 25 years ago. And so we need to have books where all people are represented. And it's not just so our kids who are of a different culture or a different, gender or of a different, lifestyle. It's not so that they can just see themselves, which is a huge important part of it, but it's so the entire population can see stories of people who are different than them, because it is not until we see people who are different than us that we learn to understand the humanity of that person and connect to them. And that's part of the problem always, is that we have no connection to anyone from that culture. So there's no way to come together in a conversation until there's a connection. And so I've spent a lot of time in building books that represent humanity all across the board. And this year I'm going to be doing daily book talks on those books so that kids can have those books that I finally have gotten into the library. We spent the entirety of our budget on books that reflect, multiculturalism and identity. And so spending the time to make sure those get out to kids so that they can see themselves in books, but so that we can see others in books, so that we can start learning how to connect with one another and hear stories about kids who are not like us.
Right. And I think that there's a lot of young people out there right now, and that maybe don't have access to teachers like you, or libraries like yours, but they're still in the system. They're still in the system processing. And some of these kids are slipping through the cracks. We're losing connections with these kids and everything. And they need to hear some of those things. They need to hear that although you don't have access to a teacher like this, at the end of the day, all they're doing is giving you permission to be who you are and to go out there and find this stuff on your own. When I was a kid, I had a handful of teachers that were worth anything. And I remember I was very awkward and skinny, and I got picked on, and I wasn't very good in school. And I was very, very, very self-conscious and afraid all the time. And I remember, feeling like a dummy, that when you're young and you feel like I'm not as smart as all these other kids, I'm not getting as good at grades. But I was always the best drawer in the class. I was always the best artist in the class, no matter what class I was in. And I started realizing, hey, that's my thing. That's like my superpower. And from that, I was able to earn my courage. And I started to lean on that and then apply that courage to the other things. And after a while, it started getting me through. And I started because at least I had something to hang my hat on. And I think everybody has a thing.
I agree with that 100%.
And I think that it's a matter of these kids that are out there, and it breaks my heart thinking about the ones that are out there that maybe don't have a good family life, and they're also not getting the attention that they require. and the ones that come out of that wholehearted situation are going to be amazing because they've been through the ringer. But there are a few that aren't, and they're going to find other paths that maybe send them in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And I do believe that the arts are a good way of helping kids like this at least express themselves in a non-threatening way to
Yes.
earn that courage. And I have a concern in the school district sometimes.
I do too. I that's what I was just going to speak to is I have a huge one.
Is where I'm going. You know where I'm going. So what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I really, reflecting on this time of distance education, I think that even beyond the education part, it showed how the arts are vital to our learning and to students and to, you know, when you look at all of the ways we connected with kids and when we were looking at social media, it was through music. You look at Mo Willems and how he connected with students through art, and you look at all of those ways that art is what helps us to interpret the world around us. And my huge worry is that with all of the budget cuts that are coming, and I know that we all have to grapple with our economy right now and what's going on, is that oftentimes, and it's, I know that you think it's a few kids. It is not a few kids. What brings kids to school is their passions. And so we have, just at our school alone, we have kids coming for robotics, and that's what drives them during the day. Is they'll try it's things that maybe they're struggling with, or maybe behavior, and keep it together because they know that they can't do this thing if they don't keep it together here. My son, he has always been strong academically, but he goes to school for the extracurriculars, for soccer, for woodworking, for all of the, he's passionate about those things and he loves them. And I'm so grateful that he has them. And we have our music teacher at our school who wrote a grant for ukuleles. And so she has an entire group of kids on ukulele, besides the fact that she's doing choir and all of these things. And our art teacher has a STEAM club where she's bringing arts to the scientists, and they do this on their own time after school. And our PE teacher has a running club, and he does this on his own time, and it's all before school. And so when you're looking at your extracurriculars, and that's not even speaking of all of the extracurricular things in middle school and high school, and those things are what's keeping kids in school, and that connects them is that they feel passion in a place they belong. And the one thing that struck me is last year we were able to present our win to Mayor March. She's such a huge supporter of us and the council in Henderson. And when Basics team got up to speak, they didn't talk about their wins. They didn't talk about engineering. They talked about, and I tear up sometimes because it was so powerful for me, because it really validated my time, because it's volunteer time, all of it. We don't get paid to do the extracurriculars, not in elementary at least. And he said, it gives me a place every day where I belong and I feel safe. And I think that we don't value enough those two things that kids want to feel. And these are big guys. These guys were huge, bigger than me. They were seniors. And here are these big guys who are brilliant. And you'd think they have it all together, and they're going off to Worlds, and they were one of the top teams in the nation. And they wanted a place where they felt safe and that they belonged. And I don't care if you're in pre-K, I don't care if you're in high school and you're a senior, that is what kids want first. And if we take away the arts, if we take away the extracurriculars, if we take away the sports, if we take away all of those, then you're taking away sometimes the place where you find your people, the theater, you find, and all of these things where I had one student who said, I found my weird people. And so, and they had this, the comedy that's like SNL, what's it called? It's like the theaters where it's all that on the spot comedy. I can't think of it.
Oh yeah, like improv.
Improv, thank you. My mind was blanking.
Yeah, no.
So they have an improv group over at Green Valley, and he goes, I found my weird people, I belong. And that's what kids want to do, is they want to find where they belong. And that way during the school day they have their people, and high school becomes, and college becomes, and middle school becomes that place. so that the learning has a purpose because they now have goals and a
Right.
future for themselves, or a confidence in where they belong, at that there's people like them.
Yeah, it's more than what you're doing. That's what people don't understand is in especially in any kind of arts, even if it's sports, whatever it is, there's
Yeah,
more to it than the actual thing they're doing.
yeah,
There's a lot that comes with it. Even Winston Churchill, World War II, and they were going to cut funding to the arts to help
yeah.
win the war. He said, well, then what are we fighting for?
You're right. That's
And,
it.
and so at the end of the day, I think that's another reason that I'm doing this, is because I think it's
Mhm.
important. And you're my first step into trying to break into the Clark County School District and start to talk to them about this particular topic.
Yeah, I think the hard thing is that we're so underfunded,
Yeah.
and that our current situation, we have to make choices, and we're not at the end of it. We don't know where we're at. And I understand hard choices with budgets and things like that. And I have my opinions where budgets,
Sure.
my priority is different. And what I think that would grow academics, more. And I wholeheartedly believe that we need to give, just like you said, it's what you said, what are we fighting for, what are
Right.
we learning for? If we can't figure out the art of who we're going to be in this world, then what are we learning for? And kids need to have that. Why am I learning algebra? Why am I reading Romeo and Juliet? And our GATE teacher at our school did a whole unit on Shakespeare with our GATE kids who were third, fourth, and fifth graders, and they wholeheartedly embraced it. And she took it from the standpoint of all of the sayings we have today that are related to things that came out of Shakespearean plays and poetry. And so she gave them some basis for our language, and then they explored language, and they were hooked. They were hooked on Shakespeare in third, fourth, and fifth grade. And so I think that it is in those programs where we're really specializing and finding who kids are, and that's where they're connecting and finding a push for all the other.
Well, funding is governed by the perception of need and
Mm-hmm.
importance. And I think that that's the thing is you have to be able to even it's not obvious to everybody. It's
Yeah.
not super clear to everybody. But if
Yeah.
you get to a point where you start to really show the importance and the value and the long-term effects of what we're talking about, and we actually understand that there is no more important resource in the world than our kids. There just
Yeah.
isn't any.
No.
We don't matter compared to them. They matter. Everything that they
Absolutely.
matter. And if we're not working, and if we're in a society that isn't seeing that and isn't working towards that, we are missing something very important. And I think that that's something that you don't feel, because we're gone. By the time we're gone, we're leaving. We're handing over this system to them, and they're
Yeah.
in the same cycle.
Well, kids are learning that's why I think when you talked before about kids are resilient and they can handle more, kids want to hear more stories than just. Now, Mo Willems is probably one of my favorite authors, especially for pre-K and kinder and first grade. He's hilarious. He has such a voice. He can get at big topics in such succinct, synthesized ways, and it's so simple but powerful. And but as they hit that third, fourth, and fifth grade, one of my favorite books to read is Feathers and Fools. And I actually did it during our distance learning, again, before all of this happened. And Mem Fox wrote this book, and it's about swans and peacocks and how they looked different. And so they started to create weapons because they were afraid of each other's differences.
Right.
And they ended up going to war with one another and killing everyone. And then there were two eggs, and they hatched, and all those two eggs saw was all their similarities.
Right.
And so it talked about how when we don't know something, and the differences, when we focus on differences, then we don't come together and for understanding. And I think that is where we need to make sure that at young ages we're grappling with tough topics. I have another one on war, and it's called Faithful Elephants. And I read it in 3rd grade. And it's about the true story of how in Japan and during the war, they had to euthanize all of the animals in the zoo, because if the zoo got bombed, then the animals would be free and it would not be safe in that way, and how that they couldn't figure out how to euthanize the elephants, so they had to starve them to death. And it went through that whole, and it's a true story. But the kids could connect to war in a way that maybe they couldn't before, because they love animals. They could connect to what was happening, and they appreciate that you see them as someone who can handle that knowledge. And it's okay to be sad, but what does that inform us for our future? And it's okay that this made us feel something and to be angry about something. And because kids have feelings and they're trying to figure out the world as well. So I try not to, but it has to be age appropriate. But I think literature and books is such a powerful way to do that.
Well, I feel like this is probably one of the longest ones I've done.
Oh.
But I feel like we could go for like another hour just talking about this topic. So I don't know, if you're up for it one of these days, maybe we'll do this again and we'll talk.
I would love to.
But I love talking to you. I think you're brilliant. And I think that there's a lot of, holds a lot of important information that I want to make sure people listen to. So even though it's long, I'm going to see if I can maybe turn it.
I don't even know what time it is. I've just had fun talking to you.
Yeah, it's almost, we're almost, it's going kind of long. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to thank you first. I'm going to go ahead and because I want to make sure people see this. So maybe I'll cut it, because I don't want to deter people saying that's an hour. I can't listen to that.
Right. I know
People listen to the podcast, so I might break it in the middle and turn it into a 2-parter. So, but 2 parts. I'll do a 2-parter.
Okay.
But anyway, regardless, you're fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and talking about something that I personally feel is incredibly important, is our education system and anything. So hopefully we'll continue and we'll see how.
Thank you for having me, because these are all the things I'm most passionate about, is giving, if every child can find their place in the world and learn how to listen and learn about each other, the world's going to be a better place. So
agreed.
These are my most passionate topics.
So one last thing,
Yeah.
Any suggestions on how maybe people can help with funding or something like that in the future on programs and stuff? Is there something that's out there?
Yes, whether it is my program, like the library, or you heard hydroponics and you thought that was great, or maybe robotics. If you have a school that you live close to, or that's your child's school, or that is my school, maybe you just like some of the programs, get into those schools. Any school will welcome a donation from you in the form of a check, and their office managers are there. And a lot of them, I think July is the month that most of them aren't there. Or you could just mail it in and put the program that you hope it goes to. There's not a school, if you have a school where they are doing an art program or a robotics program or a music program, that is funded by fundraising, almost 100%. There's very little funding for the arts, and most of it is 100% fundraised. And so any help, because those teachers, not just myself, but those teachers are working 2 jobs, sometimes fundraising, so their kids can have what they need, so they can have the experiences they have.
Right. God bless teachers.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. And looking forward to our next chat.
Thank you. Me too.
Okay.